Well, welcome to What's Broken. I'd put together a video previous for this, but I had failed to capture the dismantling of the motor and bearing assembly because I didn't have my camera, so I sort of picked up in the middle of a whole bunch of parts and pieces and putting it back together. Having said that, I got to cleaning up the garage and I found this little, it's not a thrust washer, I forget what it's called, on the floor. And it belongs inside the bearing housing. I missed that. So I'm going to take this apart again. I had taken it apart to put two new bearings in. So I'll dismantle it and we'll be able to catch how to take it apart, how to change out the bearings, etc. And then I'll just glue this in front of the other video and that's what you'll be watching. Okay, I'll just get you set up in a stand and I'll start taking things apart. Incidentally, if you have one of these Fleming Gray model B2 or a B3 and you need a manual for it, I do have it in PDF, so just get in touch with me and I'll email you a copy. Alright. Okay, so to start with, pop these two clips off. Protective cover comes off. Need 1 1/8 open end or box end, whichever you prefer. This is about a 1/2 inch, but a 12 mil works as well. Take the arbor nut off. A couple of spacers. There's a little felt ring, a dust ring. It's like 3 flathead screws. I'm going to crack the 4 motor bolts loose, the bearing housing to the motor. Just make it easier to dismantle once it's on the bench. And there's 2 1/2 inch bolts. We just have to separate the wiring and the motor can come off. Disconnect the black wire from the switch. And there's a moret holding the two neutrals together. And then I'll undo the ground. Actually, I don't have to undo the ground because it's... Okay, I'll cut that part out. Okay, the motor should be ready to come off the frame. I had already loosened off these 4 bolts, so they're just finger tight. They hold the bearing assembly or the bearing cage to the 120 volt motor. This one doesn't have a capacitor, so there's a little Allen key or an Allen set screw. Just crack that loose. Take it right out so I don't lose it. And this separates from the motor. Pop the other half of that coupler off. Put the little rubber dampener on the motor side. Okay, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but the lock washer with the tab is bent into one of the detents or indents on the retaining nut. So I'm just going to bend that tab down and then I can take the shaft out. And to do that, I'll just use a little screwdriver. And to loosen the nut up, just tighten up the vise on the shaft a wee bit, not enough to damage. Now that retaining nut can be spun off. Here's just a shot of the lock washer. And the retaining nut, the beveled side goes down. And the lock washer fits into a groove cut in the shaft so it won't spin. And you just bend up one of these tabs into one of the little detents. Now we should be able to tap the shaft out. I was able to get the bearing to come out with it. Now I'll remove this bearing by tapping down from the top. These are the bearings I already replaced, so I don't want to damage them. Just want to check that everything's where it should be. There we go. So this is a finger washer that will go in on the bottom bearing. And here's that top washer that I found on the garage floor while I was cleaning up, that goes in right there for the top bearing. Set that in place. I'm going to tap the shaft back down into the bearing. Now we'll set this back into the housing on top of that washer that was previously missing. Again, what I'm tapping on the top is just, it's sort of a 1/2 inch nut in order to hold the shaft when you tighten down the arbor. Use a little bit of lube, keep everything from rusting and seizing up. Take a little block of wood. There, that's set in place. Now this finger bearing goes in next. Not really sure if it matters which way it's orientated, up or down. Set the bottom bearing in place. These are sealed bearings, so they don't require grease. I'm just taking a deep socket that, see if we can get a better view. The socket is only going to be hitting on the center part, so it won't damage anything. That one's set. So there's this keyway cut into the threads. And this little tab on the inside of the washer fits into that keyway. And the nut goes on. And it came out with the taper to the bearing, so I'm going to put it back in the same way. I tightened up the vise a little bit on the shaft. Doesn't have to be super tight. You just don't want any play up and down, because that would change the height of the stone. I'm just going to bend the tab. So now the nut's locked into place so it can't spin off. Next I'll set the key into the keyway. Just tap it into place. Lubed up the inside of the coupler. Got that witness mark on the motor. Corresponding mark at the back of this bearing cage. I'm just going to turn the shaft and get this set, get the coupler set back together. Come on, there. So the coupler is set back. Just bring it down tight. Line up that witness mark and run these bolts back in. Holds the housing to the motor. I'll just snug them up a bit and I'll finish torquing them when it's set back onto the sharpener frame. So the coupler's down tight. Put the set screw back in. And tighten it up. Everything feels good. Now it's ready to go back on the frame. Spin in these two 1/2-inch head bolts. I'll just go around and make sure these motor bolts are tight. Good, good. These three were held together with a moret. Okay, so I plugged it in and the breaker popped. I tried it a couple more times and the breaker popped. But while I was pondering last night, thinking about this, I was thinking that the green wire from the power plug was mixed in to the moret with one of the live wires, which is a definite no-no. For instance, your white neutral and your ground should never be connected, because the power flows back and forth on the white and the black wires in an AC unit. You get the green wire from the ground tied in with the neutral. But when I took this out of my buddy's shop, I had fired it right up, and like I say, other than it making a bit of noise from the bearing up in here that I changed, everything seemed, it seemed to run okay. So we got a white, which is a neutral, and a white from the motor, and the green, which is ground. Things that make you go, My question is, how would it have worked with the ground hooked up in the moret with the two neutrals to begin with? That just doesn't make sense to me. But then nowadays, not much does. I'll strip a little of this ground off and ground it to the box where it belongs. There's only two wires coming out of this motor, so I'm thinking it's a double insulated motor. And it'll be grounded out to the frame through its mounting bolts, in theory, as well. I don't know, I'm not an electrician. I just play with this stuff every now and again. If one of you folks out there knows a little more, please feel free to write a comment. Just thought I'd check continuity on the plug wire. And the neutral's good. The hot or the black, I think that's what they call it, it's good. And the ground is good. Okay, I'm going to hook this ground wire up inside the box. Just get the right size Robertson. There. The green wire is grounded to the box and the frame of the sharpener. The whites are connected together, the two neutrals. And what I'm assuming is the black coming out of the motor, this has been painted green, but it's going to be split by the switch. So I'll just spin back in the two mounting screws for the switch, plug it in and see if it turns on. Get this or sharpening stone assembly put in place. 3 little flathead screws, machine screws. Put the felt ring in. Set the stone on the 2 spacers. And last, set the guard in place with the 2 clips. Okay. So I plugged it in. We'll do a little startup test, make sure everything sounds okay. Very nice. So I was thinking a little more on this. I had plugged it in over at the garage at my apartment. I'm at a different garage where I do a little bit of work right now. But I'm wondering if the ground at my apartment garage is not hooked up to the plug where I plugged this in. Because as I previously mentioned, the green ground wire from the power cable was twisted up with the neutral wires inside the moret. So I'm going to take this little unit over to the garage, plug it in. It shows here if the center light lights up, then that means there's an open ground. That's the only thing I can come up with as to why it worked, because I had it plugged in at the other garage, but yet when I plugged it in here, it kept popping the breaker because that ground wire was shorting out the neutral. Anyhow, through the magic of video, we'll see if that worked right away. Okay, so here I am back at the apartment garage where I had initially plugged in the skate sharpener. If this is correct, the 2 lights on the left should light up. And they do. So this is grounded properly. So I'm still perplexed. Ooh. Oh, that's interesting. There's a loose ground. So that's why the motor started over here, but wouldn't work. It would kick the breaker out at the other garage. Huh. Mystery solved. Alright. Just have to fix up, or get somebody in to fix this plug at this garage.